There you go.
I'm gonna walk
I said that's
down there.
amazing.
Yeah. Who?
He's talking about you.
Me?
No, not you. Don't kick over my coffee. I hate to have to kill you.
I would hate that too. I hate to see a grown man cry. Yeah. All right, you ready to go?
Yeah.
We good to record?
Yeah.
Hey, Greg, can I get you to hit the lights, please? This is our last class, and we are going to talk about Masada tonight. And this place is one of the most stunning places on the face of the earth. This picture is really famous because it shows the three-tiered palace of Herod right here. And there's water cisterns in here. There's water runoff, as you can see, where any water that was collected from rain or whatever would be collected would run off into those cisterns. You have a wall that goes all the way around this place. During the time of Herod, this would have been all agriculture up there. It would have been sustainable so that you could just live up there for years and years and years. There were two cisterns. There's an upper cistern and a lower one. Both of these hold about 1.5 million gallons of water. So, you know, you got 3 million gallons of water, plus you have a collection system that will and storage system that keeps it potable for years and years and years. You're in really good shape. This mountain back here, you can't see it in this picture, but the Romans, when they surrounded Masada, they had a little camp up here to see what was happening inside of the fortress. And the Jews, the zealots up there, would splash around and show themselves eating turkey legs and all that kind of stuff. And while the Romans up there were suffering in the heat, they had a paradise up there on top of that mountain. But we'll get into the details of it. The Masada National Park, all of the places that you go in Israel, they're national parks. You pay an entry fee. This one is really one of the more famous ones and one of the biggest tourist sites in Israel. See, we're freezing up again. See? Look at that.
Oh, there you go. All right.
Okay, I think I need to get closer to the Apple TV for some reason. We've talked about Jerusalem. We've talked about the Jordan River coming down into the northern part of the Dead Sea. Qumran would have been located here. Sodom would have been located here. Masada is located between Ein Gedi and Sodom. And this little place right here is known as the Lisan, or the tongue, and it is it's probably where David would have crossed with his family into Moab after he became king of Israel. But Masada is located on the western side of the Dead Sea, just outside of Ein Gedi. It is 1,300 feet above the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is 1,412 feet below sea level. So basically, this gigantic mountain fortress is 100 feet below sea level. The area around Masada is virtually uninhabited and undeveloped. You will see some wildlife. What is it? Ibex. We saw ibex. Saw actually one of the bigger herds of ibex I've ever seen in Israel. It's basically Bedouin, and that's about it. And there's hardly any rainfall. It is a desolate place. And that was one part of the madness with Herod. You build an impregnable fortress in a place where nobody wants to go. That just aids your cause, right? So the location of Masada, west side of the Dead Sea. Masada it's pronounced Metzada, and it means fortress or stronghold. It's not mentioned specifically in the Bible, but there may be some allusions to it. In Psalm 18, the Lord is my rock and my Metzada, my deliverer, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my Metzada. In 1 Samuel chapter 24, you'll remember when Saul is at Ein Gedi, and that's the pool where the cave is located, where Saul goes into the cave to relieve himself, and David and his mighty men are in the back of the cave, and they come, and it says they cut the fringe of his garment. It was probably the tzitzit, that little tassel that had religious meaning from the Old Testament. He probably cut that off, and you'll remember that David is stricken in the conscience, and Saul has sort of an emotional moment. David, my son, is that you? And David and Saul kind of have a moment where they nearly hug it out, but Saul heads back to Jerusalem, and David and his men leave Ein Gedi, and they go to the stronghold. Chances are they probably climbed up on top of that mountain where they would have been really safe from the armies of Israel. When David is anointed king in Hebron, the Philistines hear about it. Hebron is not that far. It's kind of to the northwest of Masada. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, they went up in full force to search for him. But David heard about it and went down to the stronghold. So he would have left Hebron and gone down south to the stronghold to get away from the Philistines. And remember, he ruled over Israel 7 years in Hebron and 33 over all in Jerusalem, 40 years altogether. So a little bit of background. The natural rock fortress along the Dead Sea was first fortified by the brother of Alexander, Jannaeus. It was well known, going all the way back to the time of David, which would have been about 900 something, between 900 and 1000 BC. In 150 BC, you remember that's when the Hasmoneans pick a fight with the Seleucids. They get the temple back. They consecrate it and rededicate it, and we get Hanukkah out of that. One of the Hasmoneans, some 50 years later, is a fellow by the name of Alexander Jannaeus. He's now king over Israel. His brother is the high priest Jonathan. This is part of the reason why the Essenes didn't want to be near, and a lot of other folk did not want to be around Jerusalem, because neither one of these guys were of the right lineage to be king and priest. But according to Josephus, it is Jonathan who fortifies it, takes this natural fortified-looking mountaintop and actually begins to fortify it into a fortress. The problem, though, is that with all of the archaeology that has been done there, no Hasmonean-era structure has ever been found. Herod the Great, in 43 BC, his father Antipater is murdered. He gets a hold of this site. This is where he drops his family off. One time he does it at the Herodian while he's fighting the Parthians. This time he does it in this area around Masada when he is being made king of Israel by the Romans. Yeah, still freezing up on me. Masada is turned into a fortress by Herod the Great between the years 37 and 31. So if Jonathan the high priest does this, there's probably the beginnings of a fortress at Masada that some 100 years later, 75 years later maybe, Masada by Herod the Great is being turned into a gigantic fortress because of the danger that he perceives coming really from two places. The two sources are the Jews themselves. Herod is not real popular with the Jews because he's of a mixed race. He's Idumean, or part of his blood is from Edom. The other place is Palestine is a really rough area to be a political figure. The Romans are real fickle when it comes to whoever they put in charge. They don't really care who it is. They just want to make sure that he keeps the peace. And Herod has already lost at least one time to the Parthians. The Jewish people can revolt against him. So he builds Masada to be a place that he can get to and be safe if the people or the Romans try to get rid of him. He also knew that Cleopatra in Egypt had made it known to Antony that she wanted Herod to be cut off. When the Jewish revolt broke out against Rome in 66 AD, there is this group known as the Sicarii. The Sicarii are the result of some metamorphosis or some evolution within some social groups. you know, when you read the Old Testament, there's no such thing as a day laborer. When you get to the New Testament, there are day laborers. And a lot of that had to do with the really messed up economy that was in the northern part of the country. Land was being taken from people. They could no longer pay the taxes to Rome, to the temple, to all of that. And so they were losing the land. And so you have day laborers who begin showing up, and they're depending on somebody coming each day to the town, the village square, to hire them for a denarius a day's wages. Others decided, I'm not doing that. I need something I'm more in control of. So they became the brigands or the robber thieves. And, you know, we talked about that area in Galilee to the west of Capernaum, the Wadi of the Doves, and those cliffs out there. That's where the brigands were, and that, you know, they would swoop down on people and rob them, and so on and so forth. Well, the Lestai, it is theorized that out of this Lestai came the Zealots. That, you know, here's a group of people that are living marginally. They're not afraid to take violent stances to sustain themselves, and they're sick of Rome, and they blame Rome for everything. And so out of this group, the Zealots develop. Well, you give somebody who is, you know, basically beginning to say by any means necessary to get Rome out, you let that marinate and boil, and you get a couple of tragedies and really oppressive events in the history of your people, and the next thing you know, you've got this group called the Sicarii, who they are completely unafraid to assassinate people. Sicarii was kind of that dagger. It was hidden in their cloaks. They became the ones that picked that fight with Rome, and they would rather die than serve Rome anymore. And so in 66, they picked this fight. Rome comes down with its 10th Legion, 8,000 men strong, heading down, beginning in the north and making its way to the south. And as they make it to Jerusalem, there is a fellow by the name of Eleazar ben Yair, who is a zealot and a member of the Sicarii. He sees what's coming, and he flees to Masada. Very, very practical decision on his part, because he's no way is Rome going to be able to stand up to the legion. I can go to Masada, and we can be up there for years, and Rome will get tired after a while, and they're going to go back and they'll leave us alone. He underestimated their resolve. After the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD, all of the zealots who are remaining in Jerusalem, who were able to get out, they all know that Eleazar ben Yair is in Masada, so they go running down there, they join him at Masada, and they think that they're going to live there happily ever after. The problem is that Titus, the emperor, has gone back to Rome to get the acclaim and the achievement of tackling Jerusalem and overthrowing it and starting to bring peace back to the region. So he leaves everything to the governor of that area during that time, Flavius Silva, who as the Roman commander sends the 10th Roman Legion to the area, and they're going to finish that revolt once and for all. And they're not leaving until all of the zealots have been removed from the face of the earth. The only access, come on. The only access to the top of Masada is known as the Snake Path. We were talking about it at dinner tonight. The Snake Path is, you don't want to go up it, you only want to go down it. When you're at Masada, you want to go up on cable car. If you want to hike down, you're going downhill. It'll take you about 40 minutes, but you can do it. The Snake Path made it very, very, very defendable, because the way that you got up on the east side of Masada, so you have Masada rising up like this. You have a snake path that goes like this. All you got to do with all these switchbacks is just roll the rocks down in an area that's probably 100 to 150 yards wide. I mean, you don't have to aim. You just start dumping stuff over the side, and whatever army is coming up the snake path is going to be obliterated. I mean, that was part of the genius of Herod, is that not only did did he create a water system and an agricultural system and a wall system, you know, a great, gigantic, nearly impenetrable wall around the top of Masada. He put himself out on the peninsula where, I mean, you've really got to want him to get to him. But on top of that, the only ways that you can go up that mountain make it nearly shooting fish in a barrel if an army tries to get up there. So real genius, sort of a deviant genius, but you know, in terms of making it impenetrable, he was ahead of his time. So to take the fortress, the Romans decide they're going to build a ramp. They get there. They know about Masada. They know that, okay, they're going to wait. It's going to cost money. You know, it's not going to look good on the resume. So we're going to be very proactive in taking Masada. So they build what is known as a circumvallate, V-A-L-L-A-T-E, which is a wall, a big stone wall around the entire fortress Masada area. The 10th Legion is about 8,000 people. They probably have at least that many, if not more, prisoners of war that are going to do all this hard labor. And that kind of wall was created to keep people from doing a sneak attack on the Romans. They would post guards and there's a wall and to protect them. But it was also to keep people that they were going to annihilate from being able to escape. And so every day, you know, it's psychological optic type wars, operations, you know, they're looking down and seeing what the Romans are up to, and they are seeing that the Romans are not going away, and that's precisely what the Romans wanted them to see. And so they build this wall around it. They've enlisted Jewish prisoners of war into the labor to build a ramp that's going to go up the western side. The amount of food and water within the fortress would have sustained the Zealots for years and years and years. The alternative strategy is to, as quickly as possible, it would take a year, is for them to build that wall around it so nobody can escape. They can demoralize by saying, okay, we're not going away, and then they build this ramp up the side of that mountain. The ramp is nearly 2,000 feet long, and it provided space at the top for a siege tower to be taken up to the walls of Masada. It was fitted with a battering ram, and so you have Masada, the ramp going up nearly to the base of the fortress. You have the walls going around it. They built this in about 12 months, nearly a year. They used nearly 8,000 to 9,000. It depends on if you like Josephus's numbers. They had nearly as many slaves as they did soldiers, and all they did was just haul rock and dirt for nearly a year every day to build this ramp, while the Zealots are, you know, spears, arrows, rocks, whatever they could find, they're dropping that down even on their own people to keep them from being able to build that ramp. And so the plan was get that siege ramp built. The siege tower would be pushed up to the walls of Masada. It was equipped with a battering ram. And so finally, when they get up to the wall, they have the siege tower. The battering ram begins to hit at probably about the middle or the lower part of that wall in order to bring all of it down in that section. And after a while, they are able to get a breach in the western wall. Come on. So finally, after about a year, the ramp is done. Lots of people have died. The Romans are more hacked off than ever because they want to go home. It's this uninhabitable, undeveloped piece of land. It's hot. And on the eve of the breaching of the wall, the Zealots know that, okay, there's come a point where the wall has been weakened. Tomorrow, they're coming through. The date is April 15, 73 AD. And the Zealots decide, okay, if we fight, we might be outgunned and they're going to take us prisoner. We do not want that. What they choose instead is a mass execution. I shouldn't say execution. It was a mass death. There were 967 people up on top of that mountain, zealots. Men, women, children. There were 967. And they chose to die by their own hand than by the hands of the Romans. And so the night before the Romans break through the wall, 960 Jews die. What they do is Eleazar ben Yair motivates them with this speech that, is very famous in, like the Gettysburg Address for us, or the second inaugural address by Lincoln, very famous. He gets up and he rallies the troops, and the heads of the households, true story, heads of the households kill everybody in their family. And then there are 10 that are chosen by lot that kill all the heads of the household. And then 1 is chosen out of the 10 by casting lots to kill the 9, and then he falls on his own sword. And so the next morning, the Romans are down below, and they see fire, smoke. They don't know what's going on up there, but they know something is happening. When they go through the next day, they find 960 dead bodies up there, and everything has been burned to the ground except the food is still intact and the water has not been polluted. And Eleazar ben Yair wanted to show the Romans that we died by our own hands. It was our choice. We have burned everything here in order for you not to be able to take any of it. But we wanted you to know that we did not surrender. The food was here. We could have lived. The water was here. We could have lived. We could have fought. We could have fought to the death. But we chose to die by our own hand rather than become slaves to the Roman Empire. The only survivors were 2 women and 5 children who had hidden themselves in a drainage ditch. And they are the ones who relate this story to the Romans of what happened on that night. Everything had been burned with the exception of the food and the water. And Eleazar ben Yair's, this is not what he said literally, but as it was related, as Josephus heard it from what the women and the children had related to him, Eleazar ben Yair said something like this: "Since we long ago resolved never to be servants to the Romans, nor to any other than to God himself, who alone is the true and just Lord of mankind, the time has now come that obliges us to make that resolution true in practice. We were the very first that revolted, and we are the last to fight against them, and I cannot but esteem it as a favor that God has granted us, that it is still in our power to die bravely and in a state of freedom." And so they killed themselves. And in Israel today, Masada is like, for Texans it would be, remember the Alamo. In Israel, Masada is symbolic of that resolve to never live in defeat and to never be enslaved by any nation ever again. And so in Israel today, even to this day, there are certain divisions in the Israel Defense Force that they take their military oath atop Masada, and symbolically, it's a throwback to what happened on April 15th, 73 A.D., and the words are Masada become members of the Israeli military. And so what we have here is we're going to look at some pictures here now. This is an aluminum model that's found down in the guest shop and the entrance to the park. And as you can see, it's fairly good size. You can see it in scale to the people's legs around it. But it gives you an idea of what Masada must have looked like during the time of Herod the Great and the Zealots and the siege of Masada. Here are the 3 levels of the palace of Herod. Here you have the wall. Here you have, these are exact duplicates of what the walls, the sides of the mountain are like. You can't climb up there in a very stealthy way to take that wall. Here are some storage units. You have a synagogue over on this area. But that is, in a sense, what it looked like during this time of history that I've just mentioned. This is what it looks like today. And so here's Masada, the top of it. Here are those storage units. Here's the 3 levels of the palace, and here's that snake path. So here and here, you're basically having to aim your projectiles or your weapons in order to, I mean, any army that is dumb enough to go single file up this thing is going to be obliterated. But you can see there, I mean, there's nothing around it. And the siege, that's a siege wall right there. Excuse me, the ramp right there. The Dead Sea is over here. This is the western side. That's the ramp right there. 2 ways to the top, cable car, the snake path. Take the cable car up, the snake path down. Whoop, it didn't show up. There we go. There we go. If you're afraid of heights, don't stand near the edge of the cable car. It's all glass. Wayne stood in the middle of it, I think, didn't you?
I did.
Everybody else is Spider-Man in the glass, yeah. But what we're going to do as we look at the pictures is we're going to begin right here. The snake path comes up like this, and that's the eastern gate right there for the snake path. Dead Sea is over here. And we're going to work our way around. Here's storage units. Here's the palace. Over here you can see the cisterns. It's over in this area that the lots were found that they cast for the ones that would kill the heads of households and then who would kill those 10. We still have the synagogue. The western gate is right here. The breach is right here to the north of the western gate. There was a palace here. There's a mikveh bath, a ritual bath here, and then we'll swing back around and you'll see what the inside of that looks like. This is as you just get up on top. Right over here is the entrance into the top. You can see Wayne right here. There's Jordan. And this is looking out over that area where there would have been agriculture that would have, kept, the crops would have kept coming up and they would have had sustainable food for years and years and years. And they had to do this very scientifically, very precisely. Because of the water issue up there, they had to use water very sparingly and very wisely to keep all of that going. I mean, they're growing a garden in a place where nothing grows. Here are the, oh, come on. There we go. Here are those long storage units that we saw on that map and on that model. You can see that that water, you make mortar out of water. And so there's not going to be a lot of mortar up here. They're just going to stack these rocks and fill in the gaps as best they can. They'll put dirt in there. Whatever rain comes is going to hit it and kind of seal it up. But you can see these walls are a lot different than a lot of the walls that you see you don't see walls like this except in the southern part of the Judean desert. But these would have just been filled with vats of oil, with bushels of different kinds of grains. There, all kinds of foodstuffs would have been left.
Mark, isn't that line below it is original? Isn't that what they told us?
Yes, this is part of the original that would have gone back to the Hasmonean, or the period in which Masada was under siege. And then here, we're on the very north end of Masada. No, we're not. There we go. And so this is that top layer. There would have been apartments up on top of this. These would have been chambers and these kinds of things. And there would have been a walkway on the inside of that would have allowed, the stairways would have allowed him to go down to the second level and down to the bottom level. But you can see, boy, you just about have to be a billy goat gruff to be able to scale those walls, and a determined goat at that. And this is looking at it from the side of the mountain. There's 1, 2, and 3. And you can see here there's a railing there. That would have been a walkway that would have allowed him to be able to to get to certain parts of Masada without having to go all the way to the top. Also, the cisterns of water would have been in this area as well, and the runoff would have been trapped in some of the, and you'll see it in one of the other models, but there was also a path for the slaves or to carry the water from the lower cistern, as well as beasts of burden to do it as well. But you can see, if you're Herod and somebody's coming after you, I mean, how far are they away from you before you see them? I mean, they're going to be worn out by the time they get to Masada, and you're going to be prepared for them because you can just see for miles and miles and miles and miles. Here's the view to the east from Herod's palace. You can see down here, this is one of the Roman camps. This is one of the Roman camps. Here's that wall that they built around it, and you can see here's the Dead Sea, and that's the view to the east. The view to the north, here's the view to the north, and this would have been the, Ein Gedi is right up the road, and then Qumran, and then, Jerusalem over here. I mean, how far do you think you can see? You can see forever. Yeah, you can see forever. And you're only, this gives you an idea too. You're only at sea level. Right where we're standing, that's sea level. That's not even, you're not even as high in the world as you are standing in San Antonio right now. But you can just see it's such a great depression. That Jordan River Valley is deep, 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 deep. As you move around from the palace, you come to the Caldarium. We've seen these things before, but these things are not all that tall. They're about this tall. They are the pillars or the columns that would have had a floor over the top of it. The furnace right here would have been blazing hot, sending hot air. There would have been billows that would have sent hot air in between these pillars throughout that open area beneath the wall. Above it would have been it was basically an indoor swimming pool that was heated for this particular Caldarium. There was also one that was a dry heat. This was a place where Herod, went to enjoy himself, believe it or not. And so you can see the little ramp right here, or the walkway that you're on, because you're not allowed to get down into it. And so these little pylons right here, they would have been the support to the floor. Above the floor would have been water. The furnace, as you see in this next picture, that furnace right there would have been blasting some heat underneath that floor that would have heated up the water. So if you want a hot bath that night, you got to start pretty early to get that big room heated up. And oh, come on. You would have mosaics. You would also have frescoes. Even after 2,000 years, you can see the colors are still very, very vivid. It would have been just a very beautiful, peaceful place for rich folk to hang out. This is outside the little room that is, it would have been sort of the northwest end of Masada, where the lots were found. And the names of the people that's how they knew they would, they had the names of the rocks, or the names on those rocks, and they would pull the names out. That's how they picked the 10. Then they put those 10, and the one they pulled out would be the one that killed the other 9. And that's a very sobering moment to know that, where those things were found, and again, be reminded of the story. Here's the model of Masada that will show you the water collecting system that they had at the time. And this is up on top of Masada. So here's the palace. And what you have here are ways that when rain came down, it would be collected and run into the cisterns. There was an upper cistern, there was a lower cistern. Both of them would hold about 1.5 million gallons of water. The ones in the lower cistern, that water would be transported either by a slave or servant or a donkey. The water was covered in such a way that it would stay potable forever, as long as it was not contaminated by something. It was just pure genius behind the development. And at the same time that he's doing this, he's doing Caesarea Maritima, he's doing the temple. He's got projects going all over Israel, and the Herodian is also being built. Come on, slide. Here's the upper cistern. Here's one right here, and here's the entrance into another one. All of them were covered. They were all underneath the main living area of Masada. Here's the Masada synagogue, which would have been, here's Masada. Here's the northern end where the palace are. The synagogue would have been located right over here on the northwest end of it. Here's the western gate. So we're now on the west side. The western gate is located here, and as you can see, there is a path on the west side, but it's like the snake path. It's very, very, very narrow, and the gate does not face outward. The gate faces inward. So not only do you have to get up on the mountain, but you have to kind of turn to be able to get and fight, in a direction. You have to break the wall, the gate in a different direction than fire is coming. And so they decided to breach the wall just north of the western gate. Here are some outbuildings in the middle of that gigantic pasture out there on top of Masada. Again, there's a Byzantine church up here. There was another sort of a palatial building that was up there on that area as well. But a lot of these would have been, they would have housed different things that were needed for the agriculture that was being done up there on top. Another picture. And so you see it's pretty flat. This next slide is going to be a mikvah, which is located about right here. All of these buildings would have been located right here in the center. This mikvah is right down here. And then this is a guard tower that was up here by the entrance from the snake path and the snake path gate. That is one of the lonely guard tower at that gate. And so if you were to look at Masada from above, okay, here are the three leveled palace. Here are those storage rooms. The lots would have been found in this area here. The synagogue would have been here. Here's the palace by the western gate, that gate where you'd have to go kind of sideways to get to it. And here is the ramp that is going to breach the wall. What you have here, these walls were constructed by the Romans to keep anybody from getting out. The headquarters camp is right here. You'll know it because there's a large structure on the inside of it. This one is the big camp that is right there adjacent to the area where you come into the national park and you get the cable car. And so here's headquarters. Right over here to the side is the area where there are presentations. There's a big parking lot over there, but they do amphitheater kinds of presentations about the siege of Masada with laser lights hitting different points of Masada and the ramp and all of that. And just to the north of it is the headquarters Roman camp. And you can see here the wall doesn't continue because you got a chasm there, but there was this wall that was built around it, and just to the south or to the left of what we're looking at is that gigantic ramp. Here's a closer look. This would have been the headquarters, the leaders, the commanders would have been in here. These are platforms above ground that would have been for the tents. The cooking area, the armory, all of that would have been inside of that camp. And there were several of them that surrounded the entire site at Masada. And here's the ramp, what's left of it to this day. So you can see it would have started down here, and they just started piling rocks and dirt, and it took about a year, and they get down sort of to the base of the fortress. They're still a ways up, but that's when they bring that siege tower in. And the siege tower has a battering ram, and they would have breached that wall just north of the western gate. And here you are looking at it from the breach. And that's what's left after, 2,000 years of erosion and rainfall and dust and wind and all of that. So you can see, I mean, this was a crazy, ambitious thing to do. But the Romans were determined. They had it up to here with the Zealots, and they wanted this to be done once and for all. And there was a lot of pressure on Silva to get it done. Titus had taken Jerusalem. He'd gone back to Rome, and now it was Silva's turn to shine, and he was not going to fail. Here's another picture of it. As you can see, you can walk up the side of the ramp. For those that are going to Israel, I mean, you're going to waste a lot of time walking up that ramp when you can be inside with the guide, learning the facts, and you're going to get up there thirsty and hot and probably aggravated. And here's a side view. They came right up with that siege tower, beat it in. The night of April 15th, the night before the breach, 960 people die up there. Only 2 women and 5 kids are saved they're hiding in the cistern. And I mean, when you see it, it's a very moving thing. You want to add something to your thoughts?
I mean, it's just amazing that they can build that up on top of that mountain. That was one of my favorite places just because of everything that was there. I mean, we worry about building stuff today, and I mean, they had to haul all that stuff to the top of that mountain
and dodge arrows and rocks at the same time.
All that
I mean, for a year,
and then be smart enough to sustain themselves for years. It's truly an amazing. And then the Romans come in, and I mean, just think how much dirt and rock is involved in that, and how many humans, and it's really an amazing place.
And unfortunately, the pictures just do not do it justice when you see it in person and you see the scale. I mean, it's just breathtaking. And you just think, I mean, unless you've served in a forward unit in a war, I mean, or you've gone to Europe and been to Normandy Beach or something like that. I mean, when you see this, I mean, this thing was involved with 960 people, lives being taken by their own people, and the tragedy, the horrific nature of it, what life was like under the Roman Empire if you had decided to revolt against them. I mean, it's a very moving, sober moment as a disciple of Jesus to see it. And then here's the breach. You can see here's the ramp going up, and the wall is breached right in here. And the Romans, they know something's going on up there. I mean, the fires are burning everything except the food, and the water's not being destroyed. But when they get up to the top, they absolutely had no clue, or they were no way prepared for what they were going to see. And when they saw those 960 bodies, and then they find the 2 women and the 5 kids, and they start investigating and trying to find out what happened, and to find out that they said, there's no way we're going to live under Roman rule. We'd rather kill ourselves, and to show that it was their choice and they weren't forced into it, that's why they left the food and the water. They burned everything else because Rome wasn't going to get rich off of them. But they wanted them to know we died as free people, not as people that were enslaved. Here is, the cable cars come up right here. So here's that fortress Roman camp we saw. You can see, here's the wall that goes around it. Here's the other big camp. There's probably 7 or 8 camps, I forgot the number exactly, that actually went all the way around Masada, making sure that you had, different auxiliary troops and cohorts and all of that ready to go if there was any monkey business that was unexpected. Again, you see, you know, the snake path. That is a crooked snake. Here's a close-up of that big fortress over by the cable cars. You know, you would have storage and armory and you know, food being prepared. Some of these stones are platforms for the tents, for the soldiers to be bivouacked. You know, that's a thick wall too. It's not that high, but it's absolutely thick. I mean, you would have to be very ambitious to try to attack a Roman, couple of Roman, you know, like 4 cohorts that would have been inside of there sleeping or, you know, doing their daily duties. You would have to be very ambitious to attack them with that kind of a fortification around them. And as you can see, they took a lesson from Masada. They built this camp, right? You know, they basically know nobody's coming from this side and from this side, and nobody's definitely coming from that side, because the lesson from Masada is build next to a cliff and nobody's going to climb up it, right? So really, they have one way that they have to, there's one side that they really have to look at very carefully in terms of guarding to make sure that nobody, that, you know, that people are safe inside of that fortress in case the Jews decide to come down. And this is always just kind of symbolic to me, because I titled this slide "The Rock That Is Masada." Masada is just a gigantic rock that comes right up out of the ground. And Herod, you know, when he becomes king in 43, after his father Antipater is killed, you know, he is absolutely evil, but he's brilliant at the same time. There's a genius to him, and he realizes, and he's very political, and he knows that, you know, Cleopatra wants his family blood and lineage in him. Rome doesn't care who's king as long as he's an effective king and can keep the peace. They don't care. And so, you know, for him to go and on this piece of rock carve out this absolutely phenomenal piece of architecture and engineering and organization and defense, Herod was a man to be reckoned with. You know, he's the kind of individual that can build a harbor where there's no harbor at Caesarea Maritima. He is the kind that can build a fortress like this. He can build one by taking the top of a mountain over here and putting it on top of this mountain over here and building the Herodium. He's building the temple, but on top of that, he's also the guy that can say, hey, stormtroopers, go kill all the little boys 2 years and under in the vicinity of Bethlehem in accordance to the time that the Magi had given him. You know, dies a horrible, horrible, horrible death in Jericho. A disease-ridden body dies a very, very painful death. In some ways very deserving of the kind of life that he lived in terms of cruelty to his own family, to his own wives. But you stand and you say, there was a guy that had a vision for what this thing could look like, and it was realized. And then you know the history of this place, and you know, I just think that Masada is one of the most interesting places, not just in Israel but in the entire world. You want to add some things as we close out?
No, that's, you pretty much hit it. I mean, it's just amazing.
Are there any good movies about?
Yeah, the Masada series is really good. I've not seen it. Randy Thompson, he has an. I think there's. You want to see the edited. You want to see the made-for-TV edit version of it, but I think it's in 4 parts. And you know, Randy is, in my estimation, he's a world-class Roman Latin scholar, and he saw the Masada, and it's one of his favorite movies. He thinks it is incredibly accurate to the period. You know, and Randy, if you've ever spent any time with Randy talking about, he knows the levels of architecture, the levels of archaeology. He doesn't just know a segment of Roman history. He knows it all and how it all relates to each other. And so he would know whether or not the costumes are authentic in this particular movie, and he thought it was stellar. So if you do want to see something, I believe it's a mini series called Masada, and I think you can get an edited version of it. I don't know what the unedited version has in it, but the one that he shows it to his kids at St. Mary's, and before that Churchill, his Latin students, to get them excited about the Roman world. This is the last class. I really appreciate you guys hanging in here for 16 weeks. For those going to Israel, I hope you're a little bit better prepared for what you're going to see, what you're going to learn, what you're going to experience. Again, I've given you nothing compared to the amount of information that you're going to get each day in Israel. I mean, it's like drinking out of an open water fire hydrant. You go back every night and you don't have any trouble going to sleep. This particular site too has an interesting conversation time when we get back to dinner, because there's always, and the couple of times that I've been here, when we get back to the hotel and we all sit down together to eat, everybody wants to talk about Masada. And there are some that are saying, wow, man, these guys were real patriots. They were so courageous. They were not going to live, they were going to live on their terms. And, yes, they were violent, but, they stood for something. And then you got people on the other side of the conversation going, yeah, but they killed their kids. These people knew who God was. They studied Torah. They knew what it was all about. And they killed themselves. How is that? And so you get a real interesting conversation going there. Nobody gets mad. Nobody argues. But you just find people with an impression, a really deep impression that Masada has made on them one way or another. A lot of people are in the middle. You go, wow, this is such a compelling story, but I'm glad I'm not a zealot in the first century, nor a Roman foot soldier in the Judean desert in 73 AD. America in the 21st century is a really good place to live, Well, thank you, and Norris Elam is going to be in here next week teaching.